So hello everyone, my name's Nicky Vaux. You may recognise that surname, very heavily related to Darren Vaux. I am dealer principal at Empire Boat Sales at Empire Marina Woman Head, which is fairly unusual to have a female dealer principal, and pretty exciting to be there. It's lovely to see in the audience this every year. The female contingent gets a little bit bigger, which is very exciting. I want to say to the men in the room, this is not a man-hating group, all right? This is just a group of women that want to express some issues that need to be addressed, but at the same time encourage more and more women into the boating industry, because you're missing out on a lot of people out there because of the lack of encouragement to that market. So we're going to do it a bit like a talk show. I'm going to be asking the girls questions. I would like you to be as participatory as possible, especially the women in the room. I'd really like you guys to get involved, to ask us questions, and to, if we're talking about something in the session you're really keen to make a comment on, I'd like to see your hands and make that comment. There is the possibility on the app to ask us questions on the app that you've got, so we'd like you to do that too, all right? So we've got some really wonderful people on our panel today. That includes, I refer to her as just sailing legend, Lisa Blair. So Lisa Blair in 2017 made history, becoming the first woman to sail solo around Antarctica with one stop. Lisa also led the first all-female team to compete in the 2017 Rolex Sydney to Hobart yacht race in 16 years. And in December of 2018 set 2 more world records, becoming the first woman to sail solo, non-stop and unassisted around Australia, and establishing a new mono-hull speed record for the solo, non-stop and unassisted category with an established time of 58 days. Lisa has sailed over 80,000 nautical miles and holds an RYA Yacht Master Offshore, Master 5 and MED 3. Lisa is publishing her first book this year, which is titled Demastered, and actively presents as a keynote speaker around Australia, which is fantastic. So please welcome Lisa. Hilary Buckman. Most of you in the room probably know Hilary by face. Hilary Buckman is the founder and managing director of Ocean Media, publisher of Ocean and Sales magazines, and the Great Southern Route Super Yacht Cruising Guide. Hilary's passion for the marine industry and developing strong relationships has been an important factor throughout her 15+ years in the industry, and was very proud to be named Super Yacht Australia's Industry Champion of 2018. Please welcome Hilary. And I'd like to thank these 2 girls for participating in this with us today. Hilary especially is on the end of a very long tail of a big donation to the industry of her time. So let's take a moment to break the ice. You'll read that ad. That's one of the challenges that we face in the boating industry, that women do actually affect greatly the purchase of boat for a man. And that is, again, I think, our illustration that we're not here to give you a hard time. Okay, we're here to talk about how we can fix things. And so we're going to meet your panel now and ask them a little bit more about themselves. So, Hilary, when did you first get into boating, and how did you get into the passion of boating? What was your first thing you did?
So my family, my grandfather built boats. So he is Croatian, and he was one of the first people from New Zealand, I was born in New Zealand, to fish the Kaipara Harbour. So he built boats specifically for the Kaipara Harbour, so they were very shallow. So he built flat bottom boats and actually concrete boats. And I remember as very young going out fishing and teaching me the old ways of fishing, but respecting the oceans. And and how to drive a boat. And that's where it all started. My great-grandfather, from my other side of the family, my father's side, was a sea captain in Scandinavia. So it's in the DNA, I think. From there, travelling, I started off in the medical industry and then went travelling at the age of 22, 23. And every part of my travel for the next 12 years was somehow associated with water, unexpectedly. So when I went to England, did my big OE and ended up in Camper Nicholson Yard, working with the Camper Nicholson Yard, and that's when the 93, 94 Whitbread around the world race was on, and I met all the teams and started sailing, because we were always into power, and I'd never been on a sailing boat, funny enough, and then all the Kiwi team got to meet the Kiwi team back then, and I don't know, just every position I had out of the industry was always associated somehow with water. And finally making my way back to New Zealand many years later, I had a marketing branding company, and once again somehow found my way into the industry. My husband and I came to Sydney 16 years ago, and I was starting to get involved with the industry and realised there wasn't any publications catering for the big end of town, and there were a lot of magazines. They were all very good, but no one did the 50 plus foot boats and looked after them. So I looked at the marketing as a background, branding, the marketing, and went, let's do it. So I did. And so started Ocean, launched it in 2005 at the Century Cove Boat Show. Then a couple of years later, I spoke to the Cruising Yacht Club of Australia, and they wanted us to publish the offshore yachting. And then a couple of years later, we actually brought out Sales magazine to complement the retail sector. And then the Great Southern Route, we first published that in 2007, because we realised that the rest of the world didn't know how to get down under as such. So it's like a roadmap for super yachts of how to get to Australia, New Zealand and the South Pacific.
Awesome.
Captains. So, and here I am today.
That's great. Thank you, Hilary. And now, Lisa, when was your first experience in boating, and how did you get into this?
Yeah, well, I think I was actually the first sailor in my family. I discovered sailing when I was 22, and I got a job on a charter yacht as the cook and the cleaner in the wet Sundays. And I just had a brilliant skipper and a brilliant deckhand who really kind of fostered my knowledge, growth and my training. And I went on to become deck/host, and then left that job to go and do the Clipper Around the World Yacht Race. And off the back of that, launched Antarctica, and here we are. So I just sort of fell into it. I did visual arts and education at university, so I was going to become an art teacher, and here I am, a sailor.
That's cool. Okay, awesome. So life career changes can happen very rapidly, as
Yeah.
they did for me. Yeah. So my background is, I was born in the UK. I was trained I did a degree in hospitality management and catering management. So I went into very high-end hotels at the start of my career, the Ritz in London, Grosvenor House in London, as event management / wedding / conferences, that sort of role. Came out to Australia mainly because of a man that I fell in love with, and then ended up as conference and banquet managers in Sydney Hilton, and then in Manly Pacific Park Royal. So then my career changed completely with small children, and we ended up in the marina business, and I have since become a boat broker, and thanks to all the support from the men within that marina, have become dealer principal, and that's a very exciting role to be in. I've sold in excess of 300 boats, and it's a kind of a fun thing to do. So I shall now sit down with our girls, and we can see, do we have any questions from the team yet? Oh, come on guys, we've got to get questions though. All right, so I have some questions for the girls anyway. So we will start with...
Can you hear me without that, or with this? With? Okay. So, can you give us an example of some strategies you've seen the boating industry or boating community you've been impressed with to attract and engage women, Hilary?
There are quite a number that have realised that women are very important to the ownership. And I think one Australian company doing it very well is Riviera, and they are engaging with the female buyer. A lot of the programs, and it was very much evident at the recent Century Cove Boat Show. So, and I think a lot of companies, I mean, if they're not, they need to be. Advertising has changed. You know, once upon a time, most of the advertising coming in was a bikini-clad young girl on the back of a aft-decked. Probably, actually, I remember when there was one male and about 4 females draped over him, and we saw that up to actually only a few years ago. And I would usually email them and say, is this the look that you're wanting to portray for your brand? The Italians, I think a lot of them took quite some time to change, and they are finally changing, but I would say they're probably the one country that has taken the longest. I think here in Australia we did change some time ago.
I think, interestingly, the boating industry is actually ahead of Formula 1 in this, for example. The Formula 1 only lost Greek girls last year. And so I think the boating industry has actually adapted to that far earlier and continues to do so, which I think is a good thing. Formula 1 did that because they wanted to change the culture of the nature of people that are following their sport. And so it's progressing well too, which is good.
Actually, I think the Formula 1 story is very important because I knew an agency who hired all the girls, and she told actually a very compelling story about how important the Greek girls' roles were, and a lot of them were going through university. That was the way that they were earning money, and she thought it was crazy that they had got rid of the Greek girls. So she actually put forward a very good story, and I thought, actually, no, this is crazy. Then I heard the other side, and having 2 young girls, it made me actually my first real awareness, I would have to say, about this and anything otherwise, where young girls and boys look up to a hero throughout their lifetime. And they said that all of our female young daughters looking up to them, I want to be a good girl. And someone turned around and said, well, don't you want them to look up to being a race car driver? So which direction do you want them to take? And it made me really think about who you are looking up to, and why shouldn't they be looking up to being a Formula 1 driver? Why are they only stopping at good girl? Not that there was anything wrong with it. That's what I wanted to put forward. There is nothing wrong with that, but I think we have to look at our daughters coming through and what people they are into.
And in fact, Formula 1 have now introduced a series of go-kart programs for 13 to 18-year-old girls. And they've also started the W Series this year, which is an initiative with Formula 3 cars for women only. So it's a comp that's purely women. So I think as a boating industry, we should always constantly look at other industries and what they're doing and how we can integrate similar sorts of ideas into our industry to see that progression with women and inclusion of women into our sport and our leisure. Lisa, have you seen any strategies that you've been impressed with that have brought women into the space?
Yeah, well, I was just going to comment just back to that point of looking at what other kind of groups are doing. I think the Volvo Ocean Race have done a really good start in that field where they've actually changed the point system or the amount of people that can compete on the boat. And if they've got women competing, you can have more crew on board, which, you know, ultimately can make you a faster race boat because you've got more people for each team. And I think bringing those sort of initiatives through to just general yachting and yacht racing, we'll see a lot more women participating at a higher level as well, because one thing I found was there's one area of sailing where there's a lot of female participation that's largely around crewing at sort of, you know, pit or helm or yacht racing, but then branching from that to yacht ownership, there's a little bit of a letdown with the training process and with the ability to get onto boats and actually start learning how to park a boat, how to do maintenance on a boat, and how to become a boat owner and what are all the things that are involved with being a boat owner. And so we have a very low female boat ownership as a result of that. The initiatives that include more women in racing or just sailing in general, then I think a lot of that will carry through to boat ownership over time because they're getting more experience in different roles on board. I mean, how many women here do yacht racing? Just show of hands. Come on, there's a few girls in that audience. Put your hands up. There's one. Okay, anyone else? Two? Yeah? So what position do you do when you're racing? Trim and pit, generally, are the two positions most women do with yacht racing. So we're not getting the chance to jump on the helm. We're not getting the chance to do other positions on a boat. It's always pit and trim, 90% of the time with female yacht racers. And so if you're going from that to helm, at least when you're at helm, then you get more confident with your boat and with your racing, so you can actually go out and get your own boat and start racing yourself. And a lot of marinas, and I mention this because a lot of marinas have yacht clubs associated with them or on site, but a lot of yacht clubs do like a point score series, and they do a ladies racing day. But 90% of that, those ladies racing days, the points from that race don't actually apply to the overall point score series. They only, it's like a token, oh here, we'll give you one day, but we're not going to make the points count to the overall score because it's just a girl driving. So it's kind of like, how do we make that a bit more streamlined, or at least make those points count to the overall point score series, so it's taken more seriously by everybody on the boat, because then adequate training is going to be given to those women so that the scores don't drop. So then they're getting better opportunity to start helming and getting out and participating at a much higher level. So yeah, I think the Volvo Ocean Race has certainly led that position forward, but I'd like to see more of it.
In the research for this event, I found the same clubs seem to do a lot of work for women. There's a lot of events out there that occur, and there's some Facebook groups, private groups and things that exist for women. But private marinas less so. We have a little program in our marina called Empire Girls Club, and it's specifically for the women at the marina. We hold events for them. We'll hold a rope training day, and we'll hold a driver training day, and we'll hold a maintenance training day, and those sorts of things. Is there anybody else in the room that's doing those sorts of initiatives in their marinas to encourage women to get involved more in the boating? What do you do?
We've just started off ladies racing days, and the same thing with Vaux, women training horses, bits and pieces.
And that's in Papua New Guinea?
Yeah,
Fantastic. That's great. Yeah. Anyone else doing any of those sorts of initiatives? Can I encourage you to do so in your marinas? The women, and you need to adapt to the different generations of the women. So the women who are in their 60s at our marina, for example, they have no desire to drive their husband's boat. Absolutely no desire to what. They're very happy to just enjoy being on the back with a glass of champagne. But the 35-year-old women at your marina and the 40-year-old women at your marina are more confident, and they want to get involved with looking after that boat, driving that boat. Yes?
Just to your question, I'm not quite sure that I agree with about 60-year-old women who takes the job very effectively every weekend. She steers the boat better than I do. At a Royal Queensland Yacht Squadron, I think we promote achieve gender balance in energy sailing, particularly in the tackers, but in our dinghies as well. I think that progression might work through to fuel boats and racing over time. But we're seeing a lot of interest in
Now, whether that's an age difference that the women start having kids and raising families, or they're going for their career, so they're trying to get training, but you try and go into sort of offshore sailing, and the female participation is 5%. Like it drops massively in positions of boat ownership or skipper kind of management positions on a boat. And I don't know kind of how to transition that gap through and keep it, but
I just wonder, Stacey, I agree with you 100%. I just wonder whether, 10 years ago, there wouldn't have been gender balance in junior sport.
yeah.
It wasn't in all sports. So I just wonder if it's going to transition through if we keep encouraging.
Yeah, and it will eventually, yeah.
I think it's about providing opportunity, and that's what it's all about for the female sailors. The Southport Stevens, just before Easter this year, the number of female sailors sailing on the higher performance boats at the top end of the scale was significantly increasing.
Yeah.
And in critical positions, bow person and crews. And that's great to see. It's about opportunity, and you're seeing women appear on those boats in critical positions and as boat captains. And I think it behoves all of us. We all come from the same sailing club, but it's about providing opportunity. And even if it gets down to opportunity within the workplace and in the marinas as well. 3 of our critical positions within our marina are female. They're not hands on the tools, but they're running the office, and they run the critical management of the office, booking boats into slipping, understanding tides, draft, beam, etc. And they manage that side of the house. So I think it's just a matter of encouragement and opportunity.
Yeah, and through preparation for this talk, I pitched that I'm coming to this event to an online Facebook group that's full of women, 18,000 members around Australia. And one of the thoughts that came through that was people who do have inclusion on their boats, so race boats that have females on board, which is almost every boat these days will have at least one girl racing with them. But can they then run sort of club training days associated with that boat, so the girls are getting a chance to be in other positions? It might not be on a race day, but when they get their skills up to the right level, then they can go into those positions on a race day, because you'll often find females make some of the best helmsmen because we fine-tune the details. And so there's a lot of kind of initiatives like that I think marinas specifically could start reaching out to your club members and saying, all right, well, let's do 1 day a week, we do a mock race course, and we get girls on the helm, and we get girls training on the bow, and it's a training day. It's not a race day, it's not a point score series, but it's a training day, and the whole purpose is to get them sort of evenly bridged so that we're equal in knowledge to the other half. So, yeah.
There's a question from you. How do we encourage, it's the age, isn't it? So, your kids to, how do you encourage your kids to get into boating and sailing? Is there something we can do to make it more attractive for young girls? Good question. Is there something that anybody in the audience or you guys think we can do to specifically target girls at a young age into boating?
Yeah, I think it comes down to a lot of sort of the rest of their world, because if a girl's sort of socially exposed to, I need to look a certain way, I need to act a certain way, then they're not going to get so encouraged to participate in a physical sport. Whereas if you're breaking that down at a much younger age, so they're playing football, they're going sailing, they're doing it just as much as their brothers are, then that won't necessarily occur, and you'll get them having a lot more fun.
So in other words, target at primary school level.
Yeah, target a lot, and across all sports. Like it's not just sailing; it's a lot of other sports as well, where you don't have a low female participation. But sailing is something great, where especially at that age, strength isn't a factor. So a girl can race a boat just as well as a guy can. When you're talking opties and tackers and the smaller kind of class boats. So it's a brilliant platform for them to get in early and sort of carry through. And I know I do a lot of work with Australian Geographic Society, and we're actually launching a speakers bureau targeting young girls, because the more you get young girls out in nature, the more environmentally aware they can becoming. So it's that sort of side catch-22, but get young girls out on boats and they're going to be more inclined to take stronger positions and to, kind of head forward in racing.
available to parents.
Agreed.
That is critical. Just give the parents a ticket for a cup of coffee. Let the parents sit there and watch the kids doing their thing, having their fun, not being hurt on the parents, but providing a social opportunity for the parents as well is very important. And even starting before tackles, we have what we call a save and play program during the school holidays, which is all about fun. It's a little bit of sailing, it's a little bit of mucking around with rivers, it's a little bit of fishing, it's building rafts, it's watching videos and things like that. And so that's that soft introduction into the sport, and then the emphasise on fun, and then the fun of the tackles program. And even John Bertrand himself, when he talks to kids, talks about the fun aspect of the sport before you get into the super serious side.
Can I ask how you promote those? Is it just to your club membership, or is it beyond your club membership you promote those?
Beyond our club membership, we're lucky enough to have a club with enough critical mass to employ staff to professional market our services, and we cater to a range of schools in our local area, from local public schools right through to the private schools in tax programs and learning to sale programs, and they've incorporated them into the weekly curriculum for their classes. I'm not too sure what year it is. What year it is? They're primary and secondary. Yeah.
Yeah, I know Karen in the Yacht Club does a lot of promotion to schools in her area too, and they did the same thing during the sailing program, and actually have schools come in school time and do sailing at school at the club, which is fantastic. You know, making a sport as part of their curriculum, which is a brilliant way of getting kids into action.
And even just an after-school care program. I mean, school finishes at what, 3 o'clock? So there's a couple of hours there, especially over summer, to just run once a week a little learn to sail kind of program after school.
That would go really well actually. And I'll just like to point out, having 2 young girls, I noticed it through school. I think our industry has a big problem when it comes to promoting sailing because of funding, and my girls have come home with these amazing packs from AFL, from soccer, from all these different industries that you're up against. Issue coming up, and they're starting so young, and I think as an industry we have to think about what funding goes where, and as soon as the children get up to about 13, 14, they've pretty much chosen where they're going, and the parents as they're getting older are busy, and then they start going, well, you've got to start concentrating on your studies. So there are a lot of underlying issues for our industry of where we actually put our funding, and I think it's got to start early, and somehow there's got to be some program, because there are so many parents out there that wouldn't even consider sailing if they aren't sailors.
But the other factor, we've got some questions here, but the
Just with the advance of social media, do you think that's impacting the women in the decision-making?
Yeah. I think. How many in this room are on Instagram? How many businesses in this room are on Instagram?
it's better than racing.
That's pretty good, guys. About a third of the room is on Instagram, which is fantastic. You're very right with that. The Instagram space is a young space, and it's a female space as well, and we can use it as a channel of showing some real excitement in our sport. Absolutely, yeah, and also Facebook is the other end of the scale, so that's the 40 plus mums and dads. That's another space in which you can advertise to get the mums and dads involved and show them programs that you're offering to get their kids into. But also, women are far more social usually than men. Just that's a big statement, but you know, there are exceptions to every rule. But women love having a relationship with you on Facebook or Instagram as your business. So if they enjoy interacting with your business, they will comment and they will like and they will be involved with your social media space. So and social media is definitely a way to get women involved. Would you guys agree with that? Yeah?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the other thing to note just within that whole conversation is that, yes, start them young, but that transition from dinghy to keelboat, or new people coming through, because we're all becoming more independent. Women have our own incomes now, so there's a lot of females that would want to become their own boat owners, but they still need to have a training program or an inclusive kind of program to get them into it at an older age as well. And sailing's one of the fantastic sports that you can learn it at any generation. So social media targeting doesn't necessarily have to be at the youth range. It's adults as well, and bringing new adults into sailing, or new women into sailing at an older age. I think there is this guy patiently waiting for a question down there.
I am. Hello, folks. I'm Matt Solly from Royal Melbourne Yacht Squadron. In about 10 days' time, it's the June long weekend, we are hosting the Australian Women's Keelboat Regatta for the 29th time.
Which is brilliant. Online.
We have 35 boats entered, crewed entirely by women. And on the June long weekend, 240 women will descend on Royal Melbourne Yacht Squadron to sail in the regatta. It's a great event. I just can't wait.
Thank you for doing that. It's a fantastic initiative. Yeah, it's brilliant.
Hi there, Amanda Jacobs. I'm the General Manager for Blair Yacht Squadron. We've been doing a lot of work in this space this year, and one of the things we've found is that our young female members are highly articulated, educated women, and we know that history tells us we're probably about to lose them to their education and to other social engagements. So one thing we are looking to do is to combine their love of sailing with some leadership programs. So we've started a Women in Leadership forum for them. We're introducing them to strong female women in sailing, so we might get some more panel representation at some of those forums. Some of the advice we found when we were talking to these young women was they don't necessarily respond to pink, and a lot of our women in sailing imagery is pink. The other bit of information we found was just be really careful of subliminal messages that they see when they walk into your yacht club or marina. Ours, for example, when you walk in, one of the first things you see is a wall of all our past Commodores, most of them men, one female. So they're not seeing strong highly confident women sailors in leadership roles, and so for them sometimes that means, well, why would I stay around in this industry? I don't see that pathway. And so we've started to put more focus on putting women into those leadership roles on both our committees and our subcommittees, and we're looking to target a lot of those younger women to take up some of those positions. So it's more of a holistic approach than just taking on the participation in sailing.
That's a great initiative. Thank you very much. And so White Jacket, remember, go and talk to about afterwards at coffee about those initiatives. They're great. Thank you. We've talked a lot about getting women into boating generally. Now I think we should focus a little about getting women into the industry. I think there is definitely a greater number of people in the industry than there were. I was talking to John White from the UK earlier about it's more prevalent in the UK because their program has started earlier than ours in terms of encouraging women in the industry. It was fantastic to see Samantha and Cynthia in the CMMs today, and it's happening more and more so. We were discussing that an initiative that really helps get more women into the boating industry is to actually recruit from outside the boating industry. So hotel industry specifically and theme parks specifically, they are both really a marina is a hotel on the water, let's face it. So if you're looking to increase your female presence there, that's a good space to look into, to recruit from. Can we have some comments from yourselves on, do you think there's any barriers to entry in the industry, or do you feel there's issues we need to get through to get people into the industry?
I think it depends where you're wanting to get people to fill roles, because if you're wanting an office manager, you can pull an office manager from any industry and they can be an office manager in a marina. But if you're wanting people that can actively participate in the industry, as an engineer, a shipwright, a boat builder, or a sailmaker, or any of the number of other supporting industries that get women into sailing, I think there's very little participation at that level. On the more technical aspects of sailing. And I know when I was learning, I mean, obviously, to go and do Antarctica, I had to know how to be a shipwright and engineer and have to basically be able to fix my boat when it broke in the middle of the ocean. And I really struggled to get that knowledge, and I would request it multiple times from skippers that I'd sailed with. Can you show me through your engine? Oh, your fan belt's broken. How do we fix it? And 9 times out, well, actually almost every time, it would be the nearest guy that they would pull in to help them with that job. Even if that guy had no experience, it was this subliminal kind of thing, and I'd put my hand up for that help so that I could learn, so that I could get that chance for my own knowledge. And I had to go and get commercial courses, and I was the only female in every single commercial course I did. My MED3, my Master 4, my Master 5. So I just found it a lot harder to get that general basic knowledge that you need as a boat owner or as someone doing the kind of level that I do.
And I think there was an interesting comment, the subliminal and the unintentional. Men often unintentionally and subliminally do things just out of instinct, and it's not. Often it's not intentional, but they'll go to the man instead of the woman for something. And I think that's a mindset that's hard to change, but it's something that needs to be changed. Hilary, you've had any comments on the...
Across all of our industry, when I think about the super yacht sector, my niece has just entered into the super yacht industry as crew, and the first yacht she went on, I said, start on a smaller yacht, don't try to go too big, because of course all the young want to go on 100 metre plus. And I said, so when you talk to the captain, make sure he doesn't just put you in the position of a stewardess. I said, be really strong about this. Why can't you become a captain? So I said, make sure that you tell him you want to learn every aspect, the engineering right through, because straight away they will put a young female into a stewardess side. So she has, and he's been teaching her how to come up through the ranks as a captain, but that's only through my knowledge and pushing her. There is most people straight away push all young female crew into a stewardess role. So she's been scrubbing decks, she's been learning about the engineering. She's a very smart young lady, and why not reach for the top? But there are very few captains to follow, female captains.
There's very few that give you the opportunity.
That's
to
true.
do that as well.
And that's why I said to her, start on a very small yacht, because if you go straight into a very large yacht, you will be positioned straight into the stewardess. They won't give you that chance.
Did you want to make a comment?
So one of the biggest problems is Australia and New Zealand. I'm from New Zealand. We've actually ratified the crewing requirements. So as soon as you go coastal, you have to have separate accommodation. So a lot of the coastal, and I know some Australian masters that work in New Zealand now, are females, and that's the whole challenge, is because when you get to a smaller coastal vessel, the only person that has their own cabin generally is the master, and all the rest of the crew are in common accommodation. But you can't take on a female because you've got to have separate accommodation. In the inshore limits, 12 miles of the coast, you don't have to, because the IMO regulations don't count on those, but as soon as you get in the coastal, so that's a real barrier, because I have several crews that work for myself. I can't employ females because I don't have separate accommodation.
Yeah.
Now, I support female sailing. My daughters both sail. My daughter's actually second in the Green Fleet and Optimist in New Zealand. She's doing really, really well.
Congratulations.
But that's because she's had encouragement, because I'm a sailor, I guess, is part of it as well, because there's only a couple of girls at the club. But for a career for her, she can go onto the boats, the inshore boats, work around close, the ferries and all that sort of stuff, but getting onto that coastal overnight stuff is a real, real challenge, because people like myself did those. We moved up and we moved onto the big super yachts, and then we have children and we come ashore and we move more into marinas and management roles. But the females don't have an easy journey because of those international regulations. And until, I guess, the governments actually try and make that easier, because to redesign a boat for separate accommodation for females is just it's a showstopper sort of thing.
Yeah, or whether they can make it a logistical requirement for all new vessels coming out, so at least the older vessels can run under a Grandfather Act, and the new vessels coming forward.
How many new vessels come onto the coast of New Zealand and Australia?
Yeah.
Very, very few. That's the other problem. Everyone's using old vessels.
Yeah.
The other issue we have is the older generation of buyers, a lot of them do not like dealing with female brokers, and I've come across this. It is changing. You were saying yourself you've sold 300 boats. You probably haven't seen too much, but maybe one or two.
You do see it occasionally.
But and I think there's that barrier of actually starting to educate, if we can, the older generation that we do know what we are talking about. But that is just giving them time, whether they will change. I think we've got cultural issues as well. The Middle East and in Russia, I think there are the cultural barriers that they will not deal with a female. I've come across it, and I just respect their cultures, and you just got to move on. You don't try to change it all at once. The other evening there was a big event last week, and the introduction by an elder gentleman, and he made a very inappropriate joke. Now, if it was said to me and we're in a small group, I laugh it never bothers me. But when you're in a very large 200 people of our industry and those sort of jokes are being told, it's so inappropriate, because there were a lot of young females in that audience. And afterwards, they came up to me and actually went, "Oh my goodness, this industry is full of dinosaurs." And we have to realise as an industry that is now not acceptable, and we have to move on for it. So most of us, females, we can all have a joke. We love it. We love the interaction, and most of the males in the industry are my best friends. And we can laugh with you all. But when you're in a large organisation or having an event, those comments need to stop, and we have to be very aware of the youth coming through. And I think what you were saying was so important. That is so true, because the young people don't want to be involved. They look at it and go, "Why would I want to get involved with that industry?"
Yeah, the younger women have a very different outlook on comments like that, and they will react to it far more strongly to those of us that have been there for a very long time.
They're very much on Twitter, and believe me, there's a lot
they
of...
will react on social media to it, and they will make that comment public to a far wider audience than is what is in the room, and that gives our industry a bad look, which we don't want it to do, because you and I know the majority of this industry is full of absolute gentlemen and people that respect women. So we don't want to give that impression of it not being like that, because I wouldn't be where I am about the wonderful support and encouragement I've had from all of the men in this industry. They've been fantastic. So
I just wanted to bring up one other thing. I've got a female friend, who was looking at buying a boat a couple of years ago, and she went to a yacht show and went to quite a number of brands. It was a sailing yacht, I think it was about a 50-foot, and she's very successful, her own money. And she went and looked through all these yachts, and she couldn't get one broker to talk to her. Seriously. And at the end of it, she gave them her card and said, "Look, this is what I'm looking for." Not one called her back. Not one. And so what she did, she actually... the yacht that she really liked, she called up the factory in Germany, and she travels a lot, and she said, "I'm coming to the factory because no one will deal with me." And I just happened to be in London at the same time, and we caught up for dinner. We just happened to cross paths in London. And she told me the story, and I was just horrified. So I got on, and it was 10 o'clock at night. I'm emailing the general manager for Australia and New Zealand saying, "This is what's happened." He was horrified that not one of his brokers had got back, and she was going to the factory. And they didn't even take her serious. They were like, "Oh, of course she won't turn up." So instantly, he made sure that she was looked after the factory. She did buy one, and now she's cruising around the Med. She's been 6 months in the Med. She came from the power, so she owned a power boat for a long time. Then her new boyfriend, they thought, right, let's learn how to sail. She's done all the courses, all the maintenance, engineering. She's in her 50s, and she is having the time of her life. So that is a major issue in our industry, taking female
major missed
boat.
opportunity.
It is, yeah.
Major.
At boat shows and in brokerages, when even a couple approach your brokerage, please don't just talk to the man.
talk to the woman. The woman makes a massive decision in the purchase of that boat. If she likes the boat, the man gets the boat. That's often the case, I'm afraid.
But that's in all areas of boating.
And it's all areas of, yeah, so please don't ignore her. Please make her part of the process. Please show her through that boat for the advantages she wants out of it. Is it comfortable bedding? Is it big fridges? Is it easy access to the engine if she needs to get to it? All those things that, I have boats I show people through it, and I'll say this is a really push-button friendly boat, and I'll show her all the elements that make it easier for her as a woman to manage and use that boat, because it's not a physical thing to get the tender off the boat, because it's all push-button out of the garage and everything. Yeah, so please don't ignore the woman as she walks into your brokerage. It's incredibly important that you, and at boat shows especially, we are sometimes in a couple, the woman is the money. So for God's sake, don't ignore her, you know. So
There was a question up the back there a minute ago. I don't know if you've still got it. Yep.
Yeah, thanks. No, thank you, Nicky. Brett Bolton. Just looking around the room, I can still see that we're still a fairly heavily weighted audience for the male as opposed to female, and that's obviously been a long term within the industry and brokers and people participating on the water. There's other sports. AFL was mentioned before as a very good example of them making a significant change and effort to introduce women into that sport from a participation point of view, but also from a viewing and being a part of the sport. What would each of you say would be something to change or something to do what would make a step change in our industry because of the in-ground cultural sort of things? Where you talk about, a man will go to another man for a question. Well, that's probably because that's all that's around, and they're just so used to it, and people are trained into the way we behave, behavioural sort of patterns. So if we've always asked a man, we'll always ask a man. So we've got where we are now. How are we going to quickly, or more quickly, make a bit of a step change in this industry to get that heavier female participation, whether it's learnings from AFL, NRL and all those other sports which are doing so?
I haven't mentioned some feedback we had on Facebook as yet in regard to marinas specifically, and making women feel more comfortable and encouraging them therefore to be more so in boating, and that is cleanliness. Women, we smell a room before we see it. We don't like the smell of diesel. So, we have, and in fact I've got one going up the back, we have diffusers in our marina reception that give our marina reception a beautiful scent. And we get comments on it constantly about how good that is. Our toilets are always smelling beautiful. And as simple as that is, that makes a massive... And the number of female women that come to our marina and say, this marina smells so good, right? They feel comfortable because of the scent of it, which is crazy, but that's what it is. And with boats too, I'll put diffusers on the boats to make them smell nicer before they view the boat, so that again they don't get that holding tank smell or an old boat smell before they get onto the boat to see it.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. I did some work with the mining industry, and women cope just fine with the fumes and the smells. And I think it's a task for the peak bodies. You've mentioned AFL, etc. That's coming right from the top. So maybe the Marina Industry Association and Australian Sailing for the clubs can portray more women in key roles, key occupational roles, and do a whole bunch more marketing to the broader community than they might do. And I know that's a big ask, and NRL and AFL have got a whole lot of money that they produce, but and the clubs have got to do the right thing, but mostly they do, and the clubs do want to do the right thing and are doing the right thing. But there's a lot can be said for a top-down approach to portraying women in non-traditional roles, and I think our industry and our sport could do more of that.
And I also think, just even in your comments there, you were saying the woman needs to know about the fridge and the galley, and maybe they're the one that's buying the boat and they want to skipper the boat, and that's irrelevant to them. So don't assume that's going to be what's important to them. Ask them, what are you looking for in a boat? What are the key things that you're going to want in your boat? And when I did the Sydney to Hobart all-female team, I had a lot of people come to me and say, we don't treat girls any different on our boat. You know, I have crew that are female, I do race days with them, and I'm like, that's fantastic. But I would give them a scenario, and it's a subtle difference in how women and men are treated in the industry. And I'll give them this scenario. You have a white middle-aged woman parking a production boat, like a Beneteau or something, in a marina, and they bring it in, and as they're coming in, 9 times out of 10, the dock staff will tell them how to park the boat. They'll start going, turn your helm over, stop the boat, stop the boat, stop the boat, and then they'll lock it off and that'll be fine. But you have the same boat and you have a white middle-aged guy coming in to park the boat, and the dock staff will say, where do you want the line? And it's this, it's kind of like you're trying to help, but the help is sometimes a hindrance as well, because you're overselling it or you're micromanaging, and it's stopping the girls from being able to actually have that independence and being able to learn as they're going forward and make mistakes that are safe to make and have that independence. And especially, I pitched this to that social media group which has 1,800 members around Australia, and it's closed women's sailing group. And one of the comments that came through that was, you know, it's a lot of partners that sail, husband and wife teams, and quite often it's the woman that's docking the boat, it's the woman that's managing the boat, or it's the woman that has the skipper experience and the guy's just kind of coming along for the ride. But every time they go to a marina, the first person they turn to is the nearest guy. How much fuel do you want? How big's your boat? And it's just taking those small things, and they're really little, but girls do it just as much as guys do it. And we just saw, you know, just comments about the fridge. Like, it's a simple question. So who do I speak to about fuel? Instead of just assuming that it's the guy, you know.
I think another big thing with families getting children into sailing is the safety. I think the females will more than likely go, right, what are the safety aspects? So I'm talking about families that aren't into sailing, and a lot of mums that I've spoken to at school, they think it's a dangerous sport. And they do, and it is
Classed as a dangerous sport.
But that's what I'm saying. But they think, oh, I'd rather my kids do something different. So I think it's that education from the youth, the little kids.
And going back to the fridge comment, as a broker, I do actually often have women on my boat. I saw it happen at Boat Show yesterday, actually. I'm on a boat, there's a male broker with her. The couple came onto the boat. She was trying to hunt down where her fridge space was, and she could not find enough fridge space for her to be happy. So she said to the broker, how can I adapt this boat to include more fridge space? And I was actually looking around the boat trying to find a solution for her. Where can we put this extra space? But the broker didn't react to that question. So every woman is unfortunately different. And we've just got to adapt to we've got to listen. We've got to listen to what they're saying. Are they asking about the helm, or are they asking about the fridge? And that's what we need to inform with what they want to know.
We've just got a question over here. Two questions.
Jason McDonald from the Royal Motor Yacht Club at Broken Bay. One good thing for clubs is the marine attendants. Lisa attends our marina a fair bit. We have 35 marine attendants, and there's 6 of them that are females. And I think you've got to foster an area of leadership and involvement. We have a buddy system, so they do end up buddying up with the male to start off with. But once you get 1 or 2 females in there, they go to school. I work at the Royal Motor Yacht Club on weekends. They sell fuel, they help tie boats up, and then it starts its own thing. And we have 6 competent girls that work our marina, just like the 30 or 29 males. So I think as a club, you've got to open the doors and have things in place to make them feel more comfortable in an environment where there's 30 male junior marine attendants. But once you get 1 or 2 females in there, they're strong, minded or positive influence, that's when they'll actually buddy up and work together, and it goes through the school system pretty easily.
And then show them that there is a progression for them to become your marina managers in the future. Yeah.
And also I think a lot of female guests would, you know, quite often they want to, sometimes they have female-specific conversations that need to happen with facilities and the likes, and that's easier to pitch to a female dock member than a male dock member sometimes, depending on the scenario. There was a question? Yeah? Yes?
I think there is a real issue in actually getting the awareness into girls' schools and into career choices that there is a boating industry for women, because I wasn't exposed to anything about boating at school, and a lot of the schools don't talk about boating as an industry at all. So I think as an industry, perhaps we need to get into the school system a little bit more, specifically in girls' schools as well, to try and, yes, there's construction, or yes, there's property, but there's also boating, to try and, like you say, exactly extract more people into the industry.
There is actually, TAFE have just started a very good program through the schools, and they spoke at the ASMAX conference the other day, so they are making in-grounds. Whether they're specifically targeting females or not, I'm not sure. But I think we do a reasonable job. I don't think we have to beat ourselves up about that. I think Australia Sailing, like their board members, there's a lot of females coming through on the board. I think our industry, when I look around from when I started, there are a lot more females coming through. We have to give it time. We've got to grow with the change of times, and I don't think we need to rush and too much. I think we just need to be a little bit more inclusive.
There's just a question over here.
No, so it's not so much a question, just a great resource if someone's looking for more information in this field in increasing women participation, women in the workforce, women in leadership, that has come through the sport bodies. So we often look to AFL as someone who is leading the way in that regard. It was a Victorian government initiative, and it's called Change Our Game. If you go onto the Change Our Game website, there are tools and resources and examples of collaborations that have worked to increase female participation in this space. It's an ongoing program, and I certainly look to it quite regularly to look at what initiatives, grants and scholarships are available. I agree with the gentleman over here. I think it is an industry initiative, and it flows down from the top to increase female participation.
And I would encourage, there's often comment there's not enough female participation in the boards at the top of the association boards, and I would encourage women out to get involved in that. It's not the guys don't want you there, it's just that nobody's put their hand up. So please, if you can get onto those levels, it would be really good to see women volunteering their time so that they can give that different view to the industry as a whole. We've got more time for one last question.
In your case, when you were...
Corporate sponsorship. So the question was, do I think corporate sponsorship is going to kind of increase female participation? Yes and no. I don't think Australia as a sort of structure actually utilises sponsorship that well. If you look at something like the French market, there's millions of dollars being put into offshore yacht racing, whereas in Australia it's actually really difficult to get the funding to go and do the kind of trips that you want to do. I think by doing the sort of sailing I do, I certainly raise a profile, so I raise a lot of conversation. 50% of the people that follow me are female, 50% male through my demographics, and most of that are in an age demographic of 35 to 55. And out of that, 50% of the people who support me and follow me on social media and through my website actually don't sail. So a lot of what I'm doing is when I'm showcasing sort of my trips and the likes and doing my blogs, is I explain the terminology as I go. And I have quite a lot of people come up to me afterwards and say, I just learned so much about sailing. I didn't know all of that was possible. And, so potentially, yes. I think, so much money gets spent in rugby, soccer, cricket, golf, almost nothing gets spent in sailing at that commercial level, which is, and even just through mainstream TV, mainstream papers and advertising, radio shows, it's hard to get those opportunities as a sailor because we're not considered mainstream necessarily compared to other sports in the industry. So I think if there was more kind of profiling, then you'd get more sponsorship and it would actually kind of feed into itself. So a lot of what I'm doing is... Does that answer your question?
Okay,
Sort
so
of?
we've got to
We can
finish
talk
up
after.
now. This has been a very interesting discussion. It could go on for hours, really, couldn't it? So thank you very much for all of your participation. There's a little bit of a summary as to what we've talked, some of the things we've talked about today up on the screen. And you need to, I guess, address, but as we said earlier, a lot of it at the moment is unintentional. And it just needs a little bit of attitude change, a little bit of comment change, a little bit of behaviour change is imperative, I think. Yeah? So if you want to stay in touch with any of us, that's all of our social media contacts and our who we are and where we are and all of those sorts of things. Please participate in Instagram and follow those Instagram handles because you'll see lots of interesting things happening on those. And I think that is a very important comment as well, that we need to get into that social space and get you more involved. Now, I need to introduce a very good man who is another one of those men who's made me always feel very comfortable in this industry, and that's Mr. John Spragg. He's coming up onto the stage now. He is our sponsor for the lunch, I believe, aren't you, Mr. Spragg? Is that
Thanks,
correct?
Nick. Good morning. No, good afternoon, everyone. Well, I've certainly learned a lot this morning, and it's been sensational. We're almost a quarter of the way through, and I'm looking forward to the next 3 quarters. Having learnt so much this morning, I finally worked out that I'm only really an expert in one thing, and that's eating. Colin's about to strike a new medal. I'm going to be a certified food taster for marinas. Without holding anyone up any longer and keeping you away from the exhibition booths, the sponsors' booths, I'd like to invite everyone at a subject, as I said, I'm an expert on, to lunch. Let's all go and have the Bellingham lunch. Good morning. And please go to the exhibitor booths. Well, they're the ones that pay the bills. I've certainly learned a lot this morning. Head and eat and enjoy your lunch and go and see the exhibitors. If the food's no good, either go to the superior or walk on stand to make your complaint. So much this morning, I finally worked out that I'm only really an expert in one thing, and that's eating. Colin's about to strike a new medal. I'm going to be a certified food taster for marinas. Without holding anyone up any longer and keeping you away from the exhibition booths, the sponsors' booths, I'd like to invite everyone at a subject, as I said, I'm an expert on, to lunch. Let's all go and have the Bellingham lunch, and please go to the exhibitor booths. They're the ones that pay the bills. There's no such thing as a free lunch. So head and eat and enjoy your lunch and go and see the exhibitors. If the food's no good, either go to the superior or walk on stand to make your complaint. Enjoy.